We've asked panelists to share what they feel is the #1 issue facing our upcoming elections. And we're going to start with our HR 73 classmate, Helen Hershkoff.
I'm here tonight not as a voting rights expert, but as a concerned citizen and as a Harvard graduate. Like many of you, I've had a fortunate life. Other people, less fortunate than we, feel the brunt of voter suppression. But the problem is ours. My #1 issue tonight at this event is to encourage you, all of you, to step away from the sidelines. I believe that each of us, every one of us here tonight, needs to step up in ways large and small if we are to have fair elections for all Americans and help to save our democracy. As a model and as an inspiration, consider our wonderful classmate, Steve Milliken. You've heard how Justice Aid, the organization that Steve established after being a lawyer and a judge, uses money and music to help fund nonprofit groups that are trying to halt mounting inequality, increasing racism, and rising economic concentration, all of which threaten democracy and fair elections. Their work and Steve's contribution to it is large and important. But make no mistake, Steve also works in small and less visible ways. He'd be the last to tell you, but Steve wrote a check, a personal check, that allowed me and my author husband, Stephen Lofredo, to distribute 300 copies of our book, Getting By, to lawyers in New York City, in Michigan, and in Louisiana. Some of these lawyers have Harvard degrees, some of them have NYU degrees. All of them are underpaid, underappreciated, and overworked as they advocate for people who are less fortunate than we. Hundreds of thousands of people in the United States who, through no fault of their own, can't pay the rent and don't know where the next meal is coming from and are blocked at the polls when they try to cast their vote. So if you are here tonight, I assume that, like me, you are a concerned citizen. My #1 issue is that you turn that concern into action. Working together in ways large and small, we can try to have fair elections, we can try to save our democracy.
For me, the #1 issue really is the federal judiciary. I think that this matters in terms of, civil rights broadly and our constitutional rights, but even more specifically, we need the judiciary and we need a president who's going to appoint strong, independent leaders on the judiciary to protect voting rights. And we've seen how more conservatives and recent appointees on the court have treated the issue of voting rights when it comes to them trying to exercise those rights and gain access to the ballot in court, and they have not been favorable. So I think we all need to turn out to vote, and we need to get our friends mobilized to turn out to vote so we can have leaders in the political branches in place to guarantee that we have the right judges put on the judiciary to protect voting rights and our civil liberties more broadly.
I have a major worry that we are not going to be making the changes that we need to make quickly enough for voters to be able to benefit from them. And as such, I think a big thing that is critical is that we get federal funding immediately in the hands of state and local election administrators. They have a big job to do. They are under-resourced in the best of circumstances. And the kinds of pressures that are going to be placed upon them because of the adaptations and the changes that need to be made in order to make the election secure in the face of the coronavirus are going to be large. And as such, we need to get federal funding to them very, very quickly.
So how much would you estimate is needed?
A lot of people are suggesting that $4 billion needs to be in the stimulus package in order to be able to meet most of the needs that we have across the country. I think the truth of the matter is that elections are underfunded even in the best of circumstances, and we can always do more public education. But I think the amount of money that has been allocated by the federal government so far has been woefully inadequate. And $4 billion will make a big difference in a very good way.
This year's elections obviously are dramatically impacted by the COVID pandemic. As we've seen in past elections, including in Florida, which was really one of the first states affected by the COVID pandemic in a significant way during the primary election there. And then later on in Wisconsin, as many people saw through news reports and those on the ground in Wisconsin saw the horrible lines that resulted from the state's negative protocol about that election, where many people had to vote in person because they either didn't receive absentee ballots on time, or they didn't qualify to get an absentee ballot. But what we've seen so far throughout the course of the elections held during the pandemic is that poll workers do not serve as they previously had. A lot of them are pulling out from serving as poll workers because of concerns about their own safety. That's resulted in a closure of large numbers of polling places in the states where they don't have the staff to open those polling places or conduct the elections there. Voters and election officials have had to do a lot of last minute pivoting to have voters go to different locations than they normally would have gone to vote in person. And also voters are having to learn more about the vote by mail or absentee voting opportunities in their states where normally they might have typically voted in person. They're having to get a lot of new knowledge about how the state's vote by mail systems work, where states have those systems available. And it's taken some education on the part of election protection and our volunteers to bring voters up to speed on those issues in the states, and also voters having to get accustomed to voting under these unfortunate circumstances.
Yeah, you know, you've heard from the experts. I'm no expert. My really firm belief is that the single greatest thing that I can do is encourage people to give money to the experts so they can ensure free and fair elections, so they can fight voter suppression, so they can turn out votes, so that every eligible person has the opportunity to have their vote cast and count. And that takes money. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, change doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continuous struggle. Continuous civil rights struggles are costly. And, you know, we speak with people who say, I want to help, but I don't know how. The greatest single thing people can do is to raise money for social justice and civil rights organizations. And this year, the greatest single thing people can do is get out their checkbooks, open their wallets to give money to organizations that will ensure free and fair elections.